You're welcome to Economy and Politics Conversation. I'm Ottoabasi Abasiekong. This edition will discuss the state of the Nigerian economy, understanding the critical growth pillars. With me to have this conversation is Dr. Temitope Oshikoya, an economist and CEO of Nextnomics. It's great to have you in the conversation.
Thank you very much. Let me first of all thank ProShare for the opportunity to share some insight on the Nigerian economy. I think you guys are doing a good job. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Oshikoya. Very nice to see you. A long time we've had these conversations. The last time we had a conversation was during the COVID period. So it's always good to have you around to give insights into the economy. Let's first get your reaction. Last week, the Central Bank of Nigeria held its 300th Monetary Policy Committee meeting. And as several analysts and economists had projected, including the analysis from ProShare, the Central Bank MPC retained the monetary policy rates at 27.5%, and other parameters were retained. The cash reserve ratio 50%, and the liquidity ratio and others were retained. Symmetrical corridor. I just want to get your reaction on this, considering the fact that just April, the National Bureau of Statistics released the April inflation rate that it had declined to 23.71%. What does it all mean at this time for the monetary policy angle?
I think the Monetary Policy Committee of the CBN are simply trying to be very cautious. First, the objective is to ensure macroeconomic stability. And, before Tinubu came in, there was what we can call macroeconomic instability. And then, when they liberalized the exchange rate and removed subsidies, the inflation skyrocketed from the level where they met it. So they need to, which created a lot of uncertainties in terms of investment planning and so on. So they needed to make sure that they are able to stabilize the economy, especially at the macro level, the exchange rate, and so on. So I think so far they've done a good job in bringing, stabilizing the exchange rate, in stabilizing the economy. And of course, inflation is still very high. And they should not, at this point in time, create what you can call another set of instability. It's better to wait and watch to make sure that the inflationary trend is coming down. And once they've been able to achieve this on a sustainable basis, then they can start thinking of bringing monetary policy rates down. You can see what happened in the case of the Federal Reserve and the Bank of England. Yes. It's almost the same things. Of course, the circumstances differ, but they are also very cautious because once you start moving from restrictive monetary policy to a neutral policy to an expansionary policy, you have to sustain that movement. So it's better to know that you're on course in terms of the stability objectives before you start changing course. So I think it's a good idea that they stayed where they are and then look at things from a more sustainable trend before reacting. In essence, their reaction function must be such that it's very robust framework and so on. Thank you.
So, of course, you also agree that that cautious step was important. We've had so much talk that the monetary policy reform so far has been courageous and bold, but we'll get to that. This administration had taken on very key reforms around the downstream sector of the oil and gas, where subsidy was removed for the petroleum premium motor spirit fuel, and also the reforms in the foreign exchange markets. It will mark 2 years this week. How do you assess the impact of these reforms and the fact that recently the Nigerian Institute of Socio-Economic Research said, fine, the reforms are on ground, but we also need to put targeted subsidies to social sectors, considering the challenges in the country?
Yes. If you look at the twin side of the same coin, the subsidy and the exchange rate, I think it was bold to tackle both. I think what most people felt at the time was that maybe they should have been more gradual. They should have used a gradual approach. But things have accumulated so much to the point that it's like you burst the bank and the water just started flowing. So they were bold enough to tackle the two at the same time. And essentially, we are beginning to reap or see some of the fruits in terms of the exchange rate. For example, it has remained stable. Perhaps it will come down later. Secondly, the removal of the subsidy, I think it was overdue. Everybody knew that something was, so a lot of mischief was going on, on the subsidy side. That the subsidy were probably not going to the right set of people. Where is the data to measure who is collecting what and so on and so forth? And as a result, the people that were meant to benefit from the subsidy, the general populace, were also not benefited from it. It was becoming more too burdensome on the government expenditure and fiscal space. And by removing it, it's been able to help in creating some fiscal space that enables the government to be able to.
We've seen the federal allocation has increased.
Has increased, exactly. That's the fact the state. But then, this is not just about the federal government. What are the state and the local governments doing in terms of proper fiscal management?
Yeah. Especially the states.
Yes, especially the state. And as indicated, I think at the end of the day, we should always ask ourselves, who are the targeted audience that we are aiming at? We still need some form of social protection for those who live under the poverty line.
Which World Bank and IMF have enumerated.
Yes, but the problem is that you have about 50% of the population living under the below poverty line. So you need a well-crafted, targeted program to enable the government to reach out to the vulnerable people in the economy and the poor, rest of the poor within the economy. And I think the assistance of institutions such as the World Bank, the African Development Bank, and the experiences of countries like Ethiopia, Brazil, where this has been done, can be very useful as well.
Yeah. You have been anchoring on good pillars for the Nigerian economy. At a recent discourse, you talked about it. I'd like to expatiate on this. And you also talked about the issue of long-term planning, used Indonesia as an example. I remember, well, we're not born yet, but we know that in the 60s, Nigeria had a national development plan which was supposed to be long-term. I don't know what happened to that, but just expatiate for that.
If you look, we've made effort in terms of stabilization, macroeconomic stabilization. But as I indicated before, we do not want to have what you call stabilization trap, whereby you stabilize, but you don't know what else to do. Okay? So, like the example of a building that I gave, when you do the foundation, by stabilizing the economy, you now need to build the pillars. Like engineer, I always say that economics, yes, it's a science, theoretically, but economic policy is actually more of an engineering.
Because you're engineering the whole country.
Yes, the engineering the whole economy and so on. So you need pillars, like an architect or surveyors or so. You need pillars, and then on those pillars, you can then build. The pillars will be on the foundation, which is on the stability aspect. And the pillars are essentially, even from an economic theory, they are what I call capitals, okay? To be able to grow the economy sustainably for a country like Nigeria that says it wants to reach 1 trillion economy by 2030, you need to grow at more than double the rate at which we are growing now. You need to grow at something like 7% or 8%. And to do that, You need those pillars that are called institutional capital. Institutional capital essentially refers to the proper governance framework, the rule of law, enforcement of businesses, environment, ensuring peace and security, without which you cannot really plan, without which people cannot even contribute to the economy. That institutional capital is extremely important. It means we have the proper constitutional framework that we are working with that will enable us to be able to plan and so on. You also need physical capital. Physical capital refers to things like infrastructure and so on. I say, especially in the area of energy and transportation, I say to myself, if this government can finish Lagos-Calabar road within the next 4 years, you can say that remarkably they've done something. If they can also tackle energy, these are two areas where individually, as consumers, we face every day. Businesses face it every day. Even the government faces it every day. So if you can tackle energy, tackle road transportation in particular, because most people don't fly, they use the road, you will go a long way in terms of
addressing the whole infrastructure framework
pillar for the economy. Then you also need human capital. We talked about social protection. What's the point of growing the economy if your people can't benefit from it? So you need that human capital, which implies that you also need to upgrade people's skills. You need education, proper education. You need spending on healthcare, ensuring that people have access. So education, health insurance, and so on. We can go into details on all of this. So that human capital, investment in human capital, and being able to harvest what I call the demographic dividend. Nigerian youths, especially African youths, exactly, constitute a large portion of the population. And it is stated that the population of African youth by, say, 2050 will be probably more than the population of some key countries in the world. So Nigerian youths are very entrepreneurial. They are very enterprising, and so on and so forth. So we need to give them opportunity to enable them to harness their skills and so on and so forth.
We've seen what they've done in the creative industry.
Precisely, and so on. Yeah. The other thing is what I call the digital capital. And in an economy, a global economy where digitalization is driving a lot of things, you have AI, generative AI. I think McKinsey wrote a report recently, which was released a week or 2 weeks ago, saying that in Africa, for example, generative AI can contribute close to 100 billion to Africa's economy.
Wow.
And you've seen it in banking, in retail, in telecommunication, in entertainment, and so on and so forth. So without proper digitalization and plugging ourselves to this global digital movement, we'll be left behind. We are lagging in some areas. I'm very happy that they created a ministry for
information and technology,
digital
transformation,
economy. And so on, digital economy. So these 4 pillars, institutional capital, physical capital, human capital, and digital capital, will enable us to be able to generate higher productivity growth. And over the long term, growth and development actually comes from productivity growth, not necessarily from accumulation of capital alone, but the rate at which those capital can be used to generate output. That productivity is extremely very essential. And if you look in Nigeria and in most African countries, our productivity lags considerably behind other economies. And in terms of planning, which you refer to, the truth is that yes, free market economy is extremely important to be able to bring in private sector, innovation, investment, and so on and so forth. But economic planning is still very useful. And if you look at countries that have developed over the last 30 to 40 years, starting with China, even Vietnam, I was looking at the countries that were on top of this tariff that
President Trump
rolled out.
Yeah.
If you look, it was the European Union, it was China, the European Union, and then the next country, I believe, was Vietnam. Vietnam, with what they've gone through, they had the deficit, the surplus of almost about 120 billion with the US. Nigeria has only about 5 billion or something like that. So in terms of dollars. Yes. Yeah, just about 5 billion. And you ask yourself, Vietnam just came out of where? Nowhere. But they have very good development planning.
From a very brutal war experience. Yeah.
They have very good development planning. You have a set of disciplined people in Asia. The same thing with Indonesia. Indonesia is probably the best country to compare Nigeria with. Population-wise, multi-ethnic group, multi-religious, more like that of Nigeria, and also oil producing country. But they have a development plan that is a long-term development plan, about 30 years or something like that. And even if you have a change of government, your policies must fall within the framework of that development plan. That's what you call sustainable planning for the long term.
So, Doctor, as we look at, this is the 5th month of the year, because the year is already setting by. What's your outlook for the economy? What do you expect to see as we head into 3rd and 4th quarter of the year?
The World Bank indicated that the last quarter of 2024, they grew at about 4.6% compared to 3-point-something%. And I don't know what the National Bureau of Statistics is going to generate in terms of first quarter for this year. But if we can maintain that momentum of 4.5 and you're on an upward trajectory, I think the outlook will look very favorable. But at the end of the day, we should look at being able to generate GDP growth, economic growth of 7.5 to 8% to be able to transform the economy.
That's very audacious.
Very audacious, but it's not impossible. It's not impossible if countries like China could do it on a sustainable basis. Even India, once India undertook its reform, they were able to grow considerably. And what excuses do we have? India is even a very large population. Population of India is almost like that of Africa.
Yes,
not only plus. Just like a billion plus.
Yeah.
And with sustained economic reforms, they've been able to, they're one of the largest growing, fastest growing large economy in the world now. So I think it's not impossible to maintain that sustainable growth at a higher level, but you need to, even if for this year we can go at around 4.5 to 5%, it will be something considerable achievement, and then move that over 2 years to around 6-7%. I think it will be commendable if we have to do that.
So in essence, those four areas you highlighted: institutional capital,
the
pillars, human capital, physical capital, digital capital, are critical to achieving
this growth. Yes. to boosting productivity, especially.
And of course, unlocking the energy of our young demographic, turning into productivity.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Dr. Temitope Oshikoya, CEO of Nextnomics, notable economist in the country, for this very interesting conversation.
Thank you.
On the state of the Nigerian economy, understanding the critical good pillars. It's refreshing to hear your insights on what we must do, especially the 4 areas, the critical issues of institutional capital, physical capital, human capital, and digital capital. Those are 4 critical areas.
Yes, and in terms of the sector, this thing, you realize that essentially 6 sectors constitute about 2/3 of Nigeria's GDP. Agriculture, manufacturing, oil and gas, ICT, finance, and entertainment. However, the productive sector of agriculture, manufacturing, in particular, they are laggards in terms of growth, but they are the ones that can actually generate job creation. On the other hand, the fastest growing sectors of ICT, finance, and in particular, the ability to generate job growth is not the same as that of those other 2 sectors. And then I've always said there is need to have a balance between the public sector and the private sector. I don't believe in this over-reliance on one sector. There needs to be a balance between the sectors. The public sector must enable us to have that institutional capital, enable us to have those infrastructure capital. Without them, the private sector cannot generate proper innovation, sustainable investment.
And create those economic opportunities.
Yes, and create those economic opportunities. So both sectors need to work hand in hand. This idea is just the private sector or the public sector. I've never believed in it. And economies that have grown very fast, China, India, and so even the US shows that you need both sectors hand in hand to work hand in hand to grow the economy. The public sector must ensure proper governance, proper enabling environment, regulations, rule of law, proper economic policy. We just talked about macroeconomic stability. Those functions of the public sector are extremely critical. We've also talked about infrastructure. And to be able to connect markets, connect people, mobility, and so on and so forth, infrastructure is also extremely important. And the public sector has a major role to play in this. Even if you want to have the private sector contribute to this, the level playing field has to be done by the public sector. They need to regulate, even for PPP. You need a reliable
public-private partnership.
Public-private partnership.
Yes.
So this is my take on these things.
Yes, and that's why the public and private sector should have a good handshake. Thank you very much.
Exactly.
Temitope Oshikoya,
thank you very much.
Nextnomics, notable economist.
Yes, but
for this interesting conversation.
Thank you. It's our country, it's our economy. We just need to have hope, and but hope and faith without work is meaningless.
Meaningless, yeah.
Thank you.
Very nice conversation, Dr. Oshikoya. Thank you very much. On the state of the Nigerian economy, understand the good pillars. We hope to have this conversation with you in future. But it's nice to have this.
Thank you very much.
And to our viewers, a very interesting conversation today on the state of Nigerian economy, understanding our good pillars. I hope you learned a lot, very fresh insights. But if you want to get further insights on this, you can see our website displayed on the screen. Log on to the website and also follow our social media platforms displayed also to get further insights. That will be all for this interesting conversation. I'm Ottoabasi Abasiekong. Thank you for watching and bye for now.